One of the most famous jutsu in the Naruto franchise is the Reaper Death God, but for a jutsu that has only been used less than a handful of times in the series, and it appears to be pretty straightforward in terms of how it works, it's actually a jutsu that goes largely unappreciated by a lot of Naruto fans due to the fact that the most interesting things about this jutsu are never mentioned in the manga. Join me in today's newest dual installment of the Ninjutsu Handbook and the Kenjutsu Handbook over here on Naruto Explained, where we take a look at what should be considered one of the most extensive looks into the Reaper Death God, going beyond the basic information like how it's the Naruto-verse version of a shinigami. We'll be exploring the origins of the jutsu and universe, as well as the in real life inspiration behind it, the mechanics of the jutsu, and finally the oh so important cultural impact of the jutsu itself that you may or may not know depending on how hardcore of a Naruto fan you truly are. As you'll likely recall from watching Naruto, the Reaper Death Seal is one of the many sealing jutsu that were first developed by the Uzumaki clan that were so overpowered and violated the laws of nature so greatly that it led to several nations banding together to destroy the clan itself. When it comes to forbidden jutsu, this is one near the top of the list and is almost always a jutsu that people think of whenever they speak about forbidden jutsu. It's dangerous and overpowered enough that even Orochimaru, someone who was fascinated with forbidden jutsu, knew nothing about it, and he spent a great deal of resources looking into the power of the Reaper Death Seal in the years between when he got his arm sealed and when it was revealed in the war that Orochimaru had possession of a scroll that showed that he was researching the Uzumaki clan. The jutsu requires one of the largest number of hand seals of any jutsu in the series to perform a staggering 10 seals when you count the clapping of the hands at the end to complete the jutsu. Once this is done, the user has their soul extracted from their body and it hangs over them like a spirit, and is then followed by the presence of the Reaper Death God that is only visible to them at first. The Reaper Death God then takes the arm that possesses prayer beads and it begins issuing a prayer chant before it shoves its arm into the soul of the user as the cursed seal on their arm finalizes in appearance. This then allows the shinigami to shoot out its arm through the body of the user and latch onto the soul of the target that they wish to seal away, at which point the Reaper becomes visible to the target as well. Depending on the chakra levels of the user, it is implied that the distance can vary, as we see when the third Hokage at the age of 69 was struggling to use the Reaper Death God at a short distance, whereas a 24-year-old Minato was able to use it from afar. We also see that depending on the strength of the user, the Reaper Death God's ability to seal away the soul can be resisted to an extent, like we see with Orochimaru as he battles Hiruzen, and due to his lack of strength, he couldn't pull Orochimaru's soul all the way out, having to settle just for his arms as he attempted to seal away as much of Orochimaru's prized jutsu as possible. However, if you are able to complete the sealing away of a target, a seal appears on the body of the user and the Reaper Death God then begins to consume the soul very slowly, giving the user time to say the last words or suffer in silence. But at the end, the user does pass away, where they face the literal samsaric cycle of suffering, where they are locked in a constant life or death battle that never ends with the target they're sealed away with. Two souls are destined to fight forever, trapped in the belly of the Reaper Death God, never able to find peace by moving on to the Pure Land, better known as the afterlife. Like all jutsu, there are weaknesses to this one. We laid out one of them, with chakra levels being an indicator of the distance required between the caster and the target, as well as the user's own strength needed to be able to pull out the soul of a target. However, there are more loopholes with this jutsu, if you want to call them loopholes, that is. One being how Hiruzen couldn't seal away Orochimaru's soul, instead having to seal away his arms. It left him unable to use most ninjutsu that required hand seals, but the trade-off to him staying alive was that the body he was in possession of was not only in enormous amounts of pain, but it was also to the point where the body itself was beginning to rot, which is what forced him to seek out Tsunade, who pretty much confirms her knowledge of medical ninjutsu was enough she could reverse the effects of the jutsu when she didn't deny that she could heal him. It also forces him to use the living corpse jutsu to switch bodies as a result. This, however, isn't a get out of jail free card. While he does have a new body, he still remains limited in the jutsu he can perform due to the soul of his arms being sealed away. The other weakness is that those who have been sealed away can be released if someone uses the Reaper Death Seal release jutsu, which requires requires one of the Uzumaki clan masks from their nose shrine, and after they perform the required hand seals, they have to slice open their own stomach, which under most circumstances would make it a life-for-life jutsu, though Orochimaru was able to avoid this once again by using the living corpse jutsu to take over Zetsu's body. It's a fair trade-off to require someone to give their life in order to perform the jutsu, since you're undoing another jutsu that violates the very laws of nature, so there has to be a balance here. However, let's go even deeper here into the cultural aspect of the Reaper Death Seal, including looking into the Shinto and Buddhism and Japanese folklore inspirations for it. So like a lot of things in Naruto, the Reaper Death Seal and the Reaper Death God, they can trace their inspirations back to Shinto, Buddhism, and Japanese folklore, from things like the visual appearance to the symbolic meaning of the jutsu as a whole that Asian fans are more likely to catch than those of us in the West. But good thing for you, I'm going to break it all down. So let's start with the Shinto inspiration. The concept of a shinigami slash death god. So shinigami literally means god of death or death spirit. It is a concept that is popularized in modern Japanese media, but it's not really a traditional Shinto deity. In Shinto, there are kami, basically gods and spirits that are associated with life, death, and natural forces, but the death is often seen as impure. So Shinto does not have a specific death god akin to a grim reaper that we see in Western culture. Now, you get into the Izanami no Mikoto, one of the more primordial deities in Shinto mythology. That's where you can start getting a little bit more information. It's the closest concept that we have to a death god. After dying in childbirth, she became a goddess of death and decay, and her presence in the underworld, the Yomi, it mirrors some of the isolation, haunting qualities that the Reaper in Naruto possesses. Now, the Yomi, which is the land of darkness, it is the underworld where the dead go in Shinto mythology. The summoning of the Reaper in the Reaper Death Seal Jutsu, it can be seen as calling forth a being from the Yomi, as it is an otherworldly, ominous being that is connected to death. Now, when we get into the rope of symbolism, better known as the Shiminawa, the rope around the Reaper's body is inspired by the Shiminawa. It's a sacred rope used in Shinto to mark a holy or mark pure areas and to ward off evil spirits. You'll see this with a lot of shrines. However, in Reaper's case, the symbolism, it is reversed. It signifies that the Reaper is a being that binds souls and separates them from the mortal world. The act of binding the soul of a target and the user within the Reaper's stomach reflects the idea of a spiritual purification and isolation, much like how sacred Shinto areas are separated from the profane world. Now we're going to dive deeper into the Buddhist inspiration for both the Reaper Death God and the Reaper Death Seal. So the concept of samsara, the cycle of life, death, and rebirth, is what we have to look at. So in Buddhism, samsara is that cycle of life, death, and rebirth that one seeks in order to escape through enlightenment. The concept of a cycle of suffering is reflected in the Reaper Death Seal, as both the caster and the target are trapped for an eternity within the Reaper's stomach. This eternal imprisonment, it represents a form of spiritual limbo, similar to the Naraka, which is the Buddhist hell, where souls undergo torment as a result of their karmic consequences. The fact that the souls are sealed within the Reaper's stomach echoes the Buddhism notion of being trapped in a lower realm due to unresolved karma. The caster, like the target, experiences karmic retribution for their actions, a concept that aligns with karma, where actions have consequences that transcend life, and they also transcend death. Now, you also have the symbolism in the Reaper's stomach. So the Reaper's stomach acts as a form of a spiritual abyss or a hell-like containment, reflecting the concept of the lowest Buddhist hell, Avicii. Avicii is the most severe form of Buddhist cosmology, a place of unending suffering where souls cannot escape, similar to how the fate of those sealed within the Reaper's Death God are suffering forever and they cannot escape under most circumstances. Now, we're going to go deeper into the Japanese folklore inspiration here because there's actually something you got to look at here. So the shinigami, that's more of your modern folklore. So the modern image of shinigami as a death god was largely shaped by literature and media, not ancient Japanese religion. It became a more distinct concept during the Edo period of Japan. So this would be 1603 to 1868, influenced by the ideas of death spirits and other ghostly figures. The Reaper in Naruto Naruto closely resembles Western images of the Grim Reaper with a skeletal-like appearance and a scythe, not necessarily a scythe, more like a sickle, but very similar in appearance. The Western Reapers use a scythe to harvest souls. Naruto's Reaper uses a blade to cut the soul from the target. When you get into the vengeful spirits, the whole concept of ghost and vengeful spirits also aligns with the Reaper's aesthetic. Vengeful spirits are believed to remain bound to the physical world due to their unresolved grievances, which reflects the idea of souls being trapped within the Reaper's stomach. In some older Japanese legends, spirits and deities that collect souls resemble the image of the soul collector, akin to the Reaper's role in Naruto. You also have to look at the whole concept of binding contracts and soul oaths. So this is a concept of making a contract with a spiritual being in the presence that is in many folklore rituals in Japan. It's a way of yin and yang. Priests and exorcists often called upon spirits and demons and guardian deities to aid them in a battle or to aid them in exorcisms. The act of summoning the Reaper and making an exchange, sacrificing one's own life to seal away the enemy, it echoes the ancient concept of soul pacts that are found in magical and ritualistic traditions in Japanese stories. Now we're going to go into the visual meaning behind the design that you might not be aware of. So the Reaper's appearance is the first thing that you have to look at here. So the Reaper in Naruto has that gaunt skeletal face. It's got those sharp teeth, a feature that resembles traditional depictions of gaki, which are hungry ghosts from Buddhism. Gaki are restless spirits that are driven by insatiable hunger, and the Reaper's soul is consuming the souls in a very reminiscent way via this image. The wild hair and the sharp teeth, they are also reminiscent of Oni, which are demons and ogres in Japanese folklore, who are often depicted as having unruly hair and features with big toothy grins. If you look at Kishimoto's original design for Fused Momoshiki, you can kind of see where that inspiration came from. Also, the masks used by the summoner to summon the Reaper are visually inspired by No Mask and Hanya Mask. These masks are used in Japanese No theater to depict spirits, demons, and vengeful spirits, which perfectly reflects the Reaper's aura of dread and inevitability. Next, we're going to look at the overall themes and symbolism of the death god in the Jutsu in the greater Naruto story that you might not be aware of. So the inevitability of death and sacrifice. The Reaper death seal embodies the idea that death, it is an inescapable fate. Both the user and the target, they are bound by this inevitability, which fits the fact that Naruto is a story that is about this cycle of samsara. The double-edged sword nature of this jutsu reflects the Buddhist notion that all beings are subject to karma and death comes for all regardless of status, power, or intentions. This reflects Minato's sacrifice, where even the strongest shinobi at that time period was still forced to submit to the laws of mortality. The same thing with Kaguya, someone who was seen as being a god. The six-batch Jibaku Tensei strips her chakra down to absolute zero and seals her body, which is why Zetsu says in the manga she has to be resurrected and not unsealed because that jutsu killed Kaguya, which further fits into the samsaric nature of Naruto's story. The spiritual debt and the karmic retribution is the next thing you have to look at. So the sealing process, it binds both the caster and the target within the Reaper's stomach, representing a kind of spiritual debt. The cost of using forbidden knowledge is a central motif in many Japanese myths, where those who dabble in dark arts, they suffer consequences. Orochimaru's failure to revive his arms, they symbolize how defying the karmic retribution leads to a form of spiritual impurity. It's a common theme in Buddhist stories, and it is also a common theme with Orochimaru's character. Now, we're going to briefly summarize the key influences of the Reaper Death God and the Reaper Death Seal. So you have in Shinto, Izanami and the Yomi, the Reaper as being a death-related being, the Yomi as being the underworld, and the Shinigami ropes being serving as barriers. In Buddhism, you have samsara and you have karma and you have Avicii, which is basically eternal imprisonment, karmic punishment, and Buddhist hell as inspiration. In folklore, you have shinigami, you have vengeful spirits, and you have gaki. The Reaper's design, the skeletal face, the sharp teeth, and the concept of vengeful spirits. In the aesthetics, you have No Mask and Hanya Mask. It's a visual design for the Reaper's face and the summoning rituals. In conclusion, the Reaper Death Seal and the Reaper Death God from Naruto, they are very rich with cultural meaning, blending elements from Shinto, Buddhism, and Japanese folklore, and it's all meant to showcase why so many countries had to gang up to destroy the Uzumaki clan, because they should be feared, because one of their most prominent jutsu is based off of the greatest fear of mankind, which is death. Its imagery, it reflects both the fear of death and the cost of power, while also reinforcing the idea that one's own karma, even as a shinobi, it is inescapable. Now, if you guys like, I could do a video going more over the specifics of the mask, the yomi, and how this jutsu compares to other Naruto sealing jutsu in that respect, but only if I see there's enough interest in the comment section. So let me know down below, and only unless we have 4,000 likes on this video. While this might be it for this video, don't forget to check out more videos here on Naruto Explained by clicking this playlist on the left, or consider watching these other videos from one of my other 2 anime channels.